There is one thing a narcissist fears more than loneliness. It's you seeing the truth. They're not shaken by criticism. They don't fall apart after breakups. But what terrifies them is your awakening. The day you stop believing their hollow, sweet words. The moment you realize the love they gave was never real, just a tool for control. The day you stand tall, look them in the eye with calm clarity and say, I see you for who you really are. You see, what drives a narcissist mad isn't your rage, it's your silence. When you stop chasing closure, stop demanding apologies, and begin rebuilding yourself, grounded, clear, untouchable. In today's video, we're going to uncover the hidden truths a narcissist never wants you to find out. You'll understand why they evade accountability, why their apologies always feel empty, and why your silence threatens them more than any heated argument ever could. Hit subscribe if you've ever felt manipulated, belittled, or emotionally twisted by someone's mixed signals, because the more you understand, the more power you reclaim. And make sure you watch until the end, where I'll share with you the key to not only recognizing their toxic grip, but breaking free from it entirely. This isn't a battle for revenge. It's a journey to reclaim yourself. 1. They don't want you to realize you don't need them to survive. If there's one truth that shakes a narcissist to the core, it's this. You never needed them. Not to breathe, not to thrive, not to define your worth. They've just spent months, or maybe years, trying to convince you otherwise. From the very beginning, a narcissist carefully builds a fantasy that they are the sun and you're merely orbiting, that without their approval, your world would collapse. They subtly chip away at your confidence, your independence, your voice, until one day you look in the mirror and barely recognize yourself. You question your decisions, you doubt your value, you apologize even when you haven't done anything wrong. But here's what they're terrified of. That you'll wake up, that you remember who you were before the manipulation, before the gaslighting, before you confuse dependency with love, because once you realize that you can survive without them, emotionally, mentally, even financially, the spell breaks, the power dynamic flips, and suddenly they're the one who's afraid. Narcissists thrive on your dependence. They want you to feel like you can't make decisions without their input, like you're lost without their presence, like your life only has meaning when they're in it. It's a lie, and they know it, but it's the lie that keeps them relevant. It's the lie that keeps you chasing their crumbs of affection, just to feel enough again. But the moment you begin to reclaim your life, when you start setting boundaries, when you build a life that doesn't revolve around pleasing them, they panic. Why? Because they know something you're just starting to realize. You were always whole. You didn't need them to complete you. You were just made to forget it, on purpose. Narcissists don't just lose supply when you step away. They lose control, and control is the drug they're addicted to, the control of your time, your attention, your self-worth. Once they see you smiling without them, choosing peace over chaos, speaking truth without apology, they're no longer the puppet master. They're just a bitter spectator. And let's be real, this realization terrifies them more than any argument ever could, because if you don't need them, you might finally walk away. Not with a bang, not with tears, but with a calm they can't penetrate, with a confidence they can't hijack, with a silence they can't manipulate. This is why many narcissists return just as you're rebuilding. They'll text, they'll flatter, they'll pretend to miss the real you, but don't be fooled. They don't miss you. They miss the version of you who didn't know better. The version of you who needed them, but you are no longer that version. You've met yourself in the wreckage, and she's stronger than they ever expected. So here's the truth. The narcissist doesn't want you to know that you're powerful without them, that you are not lost, that you are not broken, that you don't need their validation to define your worth. But now that you know, they'll never hold that kind of power over you again. 2. They fear you'll realize their love was never real. In the early days of the relationship, the narcissist made you believe you were special. They painted a perfect picture of love, one where you were adored, worshipped, and made to feel like the only person that mattered. But take a closer look. Wasn't there something rushed about it? Intense, yes, but lacking depth. Something that felt more like possession than genuine connection. Here's the truth. What they gave you wasn't love. It was a strategy. A performance carefully crafted to make you attach, depend, and eventually abandon yourself. A narcissist doesn't love others. They love the power that comes from the illusion of love. They don't offer affection. They dispense attention as a means of control. And they never want you to realize this, because once you do, the illusion collapses. You'll begin to see it. They didn't love you. They loved your admiration. They didn't care about your feelings. They cared about keeping you anxious and insecure. Every compliment, every romantic gesture, every return after a fight. It was never for healing, it was for hooking you back into their game. Real love doesn't require you to sacrifice your identity to keep someone happy. It doesn't make you feel guilty for having needs. It doesn't demand you to prove your worth every single day. Real love does not trade your freedom for sweet-tasting control. The narcissist knows that if you uncover this truth, they lose power, thickening your stomach, because you'll start reviewing the entire relationship, not with rose-tinted glasses, but with the clarity of awakening. You'll see the contradictions. You'll remember how they were only kind when you conformed. You'll recall the pain you carried alone while they stood unmoved, or worse, blamed you. And hardest of all, you'll recognize you fell in love with a fantasy. Once that truth sets in, it doesn't just free you from the relationship, it frees you from the role you were cast in. You're no longer the one who needed love so badly you accepted crumbs, no longer the one begging for basic respect, no longer the one trying to fix it while they just tried to control it. You return to yourself, whole, grounded, and worthy of real love. And that, more than anything, terrifies them, not because they've lost you, but because they've lost their mirror, the reflection that once fed their fragile ego. They fear that moment when you look them in the eye. No anger, no affection, just truth. And you walk away, because in that moment they know you're no longer the same person, and they no longer have a way back in. 3. They fear you will discover you are the mirror that exposes their emptiness. A narcissist doesn't truly exist as a person with a clear identity. They are masks stitched together from expectations, scripts, and manipulative needs. And what terrifies them the most isn't your departure, it's when you stop believing in the mask. It's when you awaken, when you realize, I don't have to reflect someone else's grand illusion to prove my worth. In psychology, narcissists cannot define themselves without external validation. They exist through admiration, fear, or flattery from those around them. And if you are a super empath, with a powerful inner light, deep emotional insight, and the ability to reflect truth, then to them, you are the perfect mirror, not to illuminate truth, but to reflect back the image they want to believe is real. But what happens when you stop reflecting what they want, when you begin to reflect back? The subtle manipulation hidden behind soft-spoken control. The lack of responsibility behind the facade of victim of circumstances. The emotional emptiness beneath their fleeting declarations of love. They panic, because your light pierces through the artificial coating they've spent years constructing. You didn't attack, you simply saw the truth. But for them, that is the biggest blow, because from that moment on, they can no longer manipulate the reality you live in. Narcissists aren't afraid of arguments, they're used to conflict. They're not afraid of your tears. In fact, tears fuel their sense of power. But what they fear is the calm in your eyes that have seen through every game and refuse to play anymore. You were once the one who made them feel worthy. But now, as you rise, not with hatred but with clarity, They lose something more important than any praise, control over their self-pigeon. And that's why your departure, silent, without explanation, without needing to win, is what truly breaks them. From someone who was once manipulated, you become the one who reveals the truth. From a submissive mirror, you become a light of awareness. They have nowhere left to hide, because their darkness is now exposed. And do you know what the most beautiful part is? You don't need to call out their lies. Don't need to win the argument. You simply need to keep living, authentically, freely, and unchained from any false self other than your own. 4. They fear the moment you realize you have the right to set boundaries. Narcissists are not afraid of weakness, they depend on it. But what terrifies them is someone who dares to say no. Because the moment you realize that you have the right to set boundaries, the entire structure of their control begins to crumble. Have you ever noticed how they react when you start to assert your needs? The guilt trips, the gaslighting, the subtle manipulations? When you ask for respect, they call you selfish. When you demand clarity, they label you too sensitive. But the truth is, they don't hate boundaries, they hate that you remember you're allowed to have them. In the narcissist world, control is everything. They're used to crossing lines through sweet talk, calculated silence, or the deep-rooted guilt they plant in you. Your sacrifice is expected, your self-abandonment is romanticized, and your people-pleasing becomes their power. But when you start keeping parts of your life for yourself, when you're no longer available to be drained just to keep the peace, they panic. Boundaries aren't about bitterness, they're not about revenge. They're a quiet declaration that says, I know who I am and I respect myself. And that, to a narcissist, is a silent war cry, because they can't manipulate someone who knows their worth. A healed person isn't always unshakable, but they are awake. Awake enough to stop handing their happiness to someone else, brave enough to walk away from chaos, clear enough to know that silence is sometimes more powerful than confrontation. When you enforce boundaries, you send a message the narcissist can't stand. I'm no longer the stage where you perform. When you stop meeting every unreasonable demand, they panic. They'll try to break your boundaries with anger, guilt, sulking, or by playing the victim. But if you stand your ground, you're rewriting the script they spent years directing. What truly breaks a narcissist isn't your absence, it's your presence without vulnerability, your stillness, your refusal to play their game, your calm, unwavering decision to no longer be manipulated. 5. They fear you'll realize love shouldn't require you to hurt yourself. A narcissist doesn't just fear losing you, they fear losing control over your mind, the very place where they planted a dangerous belief, that love must always come with sacrifice, suffering, and unconditional forgiveness, that if you don't tolerate pain, you're selfish. If you speak up, you're dramatic. If you walk away, you're the quitter. But then one day, you start to question everything. You no longer see your wounds as proof of a great love, but as clear warning signs that you've given too much and received far too little. You begin to ask yourself, why does love feel so lonely? Why is this person only kind when they want something? Why am I always apologizing for things I didn't do? Why must I suppress my emotions just to keep the peace? And when you step outside that cycle and answer from a place of clarity, you uncover a truth the narcissist is terrified you'll discover. Real love does not require you to hurt yourself to keep someone else around. They fear that realization because it shatters the unspoken power contract they've held over you. They once convinced you that your endurance was a sign of maturity, but it was really proof of how deeply they had manipulated you, dressed up in charming words. You see, a narcissist doesn't need your heart. They need your fear of losing them, your obsession with being good enough, your guilt over the thought that maybe if I stay, they'll finally change. But eventually, the illusion breaks. You realize If a relationship demands you shrink yourself to fit in, it does not deserve the vastness of your soul, and when that happens, you start saying no to everything you once tolerated, no to being insulted under the guise of honesty, no to apologizing for having feelings, no to distorting yourself just to avoid conflict, no to healing someone who refuses to take ownership of their pain. A narcissist has no idea how to respond to someone who no longer feels guilty for protecting themselves. Because to them, love equals control, and you've just broken that rule. You start to love yourself enough to know anyone who truly loves you will never ask you to pay for it with your pain. Your calmness terrifies them, not because you're rebelling, but because you've come home to the most authentic version of yourself. You live without needing their forgiveness, without needing their approval, without hoping they'll finally understand. You live with the deep truth that real love heals, it doesn't destroy, and at that moment they can no longer manipulate you. You don't need to scream they're wrong, you just need to live truthfully, freely, without depending on a false version of yourself for their comfort. In that silence, you deliver the most powerful message of all. I am not a test for your broken version of love. I am a human being, and I deserve to be loved the right way. 6. They're afraid you'll realize your silence holds more power than any argument. A narcissist doesn't fear conflict. In fact, they thrive on drama. They know how to provoke you into anger, push you to say things you'll later regret, and then use your words as ammunition. Chaos is their battlefield, because within it, they can twist narratives, manipulate emotions, and reassert their control. But there's one thing they are never truly prepared for: your silence. The silence of someone awakened is not coldness, nor is it avoidance. It is a final declaration, unspoken yet undeniable. I've seen enough. I'm no longer playing the role you've scripted for me. That's what terrifies the narcissist, because your silence denies them what they crave the most: a reaction. They can't provoke you. They can't make you defend yourself. They can't guilt trip or confuse you. You've stepped off their stage, and when you walk away, their mask begins to crumble. In that silence, you reclaim not only your voice, but your awareness and your power to choose. You no longer need their apology to move on. You no longer need their validation to believe in your own worth. You understand now that healing comes from within, not from those who once hurt you. That silence leaves the narcissist stranded, alone in the very games they used to control you. No audience, no scapegoat, no one left to gaslight. They're forced to confront the emptiness within. And that's their greatest fear. They once used you as a mirror to reflect the ideal version of themselves they wanted to believe in. But when you go quiet, they lose their reflection, and instead they're faced with the undeniable truth. They no longer hold power over you. No accusation is as piercing as your calm gaze. No argument shakes them like the silence of someone who has stepped out of the performance. No act of revenge is as powerful as living freely, authentically, and unbound by the need for their acknowledgement. That's when it hits them. The power they thought they had was an illusion. And your silence, steady, resolute, unapologetic, is the final blow to their entire game. 7. They're afraid you'll realize every emotion you gave was a power they could never create. Narcissists move through life pretending they don't need anyone, that they are strong, untouchable, and independent. But the truth is, they depend entirely on other people's emotions to feel alive. Without admiration, without attention, without someone to control, they fall into emptiness, a hollow, collapsing shell. So what they fear most is not losing you, but losing access to the rich emotional world you once offered them. They dread facing the fact that they cannot create true connection. They can only absorb, not nurture. They know how to take your love, your empathy, your attention, but they never learned how to give something healthy in return. And when you awaken, you see it clearly. You realize that your forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was love, offered by a brave heart. You understand that the tears, the hopes, the relentless effort to hold the relationship together didn't make you naive, it meant you believed in goodness. But you also come to a deeper truth. Love alone can't save someone who refuses to change. That your empathy is sacred, not meant to be exploited. And slowly you begin to reclaim what you once gave so freely, your trust, your time, your emotional energy. To the narcissist, this is an earthquake, because now you no longer react the way they expect. You've broken their control over your emotional state. You no longer give on demand. They've lost their favorite source of validation. You start to set boundaries to protect your energy. They realize they can no longer invade your inner world. They're afraid you'll realize you are the one with the power to create real connection. Without you, they're nothing more than a fabricated persona, an empty performance they recycle with new victims, until those victims wake up too, and then you begin to protect your emotions. You honor your energy. You no longer feel guilty for reserving your kindness for those who deserve it. You no longer contort yourself to be enough. You start loving yourself intentionally, deliberately, without waiting for anyone else to grant you permission. That's when you become an untouchable light. They cannot counterfeit authentic emotions. They cannot manufacture genuine connection. And the thing they fear most is that you now know that. You know they need you far more than you ever needed them. You know the light within you was the only thing that made them feel valuable, even if it was just an illusion. And you also know this: you can now give those emotions to yourself, to someone truly worthy, to a life that doesn't drain you. You reclaim power from the very place they tried to steal it, your heart. 8. What they fear most, that the only thing holding you back was an illusion. Throughout your relationship with the narcissist, you might have believed you stayed because of love, because of hope, because you thought that if you just held on a little longer, they would finally change. But here's the painful truth. What kept you bound wasn't love, it was illusion. The illusion that one day they'd wake up and realize your worth, that your love would be enough to save someone who never truly opened their heart. And the narcissist knows this. They know they never gave you real, healthy love. They know you were filling in the blanks with your imagination, painting over the empty spaces with rare, beautiful moments, magnifying them into something grander than they truly were. And they know that if you ever saw reality for what it truly was, the bond between you would shatter instantly. So they keep you in a fog with hot and cold behaviors, with guilt trips every time you try to walk away, with fantasies about the future just convincing enough to keep you tethered to the cage they built for your mind. But then one day you begin to see. They didn't love you. They loved controlling you. The good memories were never signs of deep connection, just crumbs to keep you from leaving. Every time you forgave them, it didn't bring healing, it only taught them they could hurt you again without consequence. And in that moment, when you realize, I no longer believe in this narrative, you break free. You don't need a dramatic confrontation, you don't need a final apology, you just need awareness and one firm decision. I will no longer be a character in their script. And that, right there, is what terrifies the narcissist most. Because without your belief in their story, they're forced to face their own inner emptiness, a truth they've spent their entire life avoiding by manipulating others. And do you know what the most powerful part is? You leave, not in anger, but in calm. You no longer need their validation to feel loved, good enough, or worthy, because now you understand. You were never lacking. You just put your trust in the wrong story. That's the moment you become free. And in the narcissist's eyes, nothing is more terrifying than someone who has awakened and can no longer be led. 9. They fear that you'll be happy without them. There's something a narcissist finds more unbearable than silence, more threatening than rejection. It's the sight of you thriving without them. In their mind, you are forever the one who needs them, the one who can't stand on your own, the one who will always come back, the one they can pull back in with a cold message or an empty apology, because they believe your worth depends on their presence, their praise, or even that when you begin to smile without them being the source of your joy, when you begin to hold your head high without needing their validation, when your life becomes peaceful, vibrant, and whole, something inside them collapses. They may pretend not to care. They may act cold, distant, even condescending, but inside there's an earthquake, because every step you take toward true happiness is proof that they never really held power over you. A narcissist lives off power, off the illusion that you're broken without them, that, without me, you're nothing. But when you defy that narrative with a thriving life, a glowing presence, a successful path, and healthy connections, they are forced to face their deepest fear, irrelevance. They might try to come back, not out of love, but because you've become radiant without them. They'll try to plant seeds of doubt. Are you really happy? They'll play memory games, reminding you of the beautiful moments between you, hoping to destabilize you. They'll try to make you feel guilty for letting go, for moving on, for healing. But let me tell you this, your happiness is not a betrayal. It is the truest ending to a chapter that was already decaying. You don't owe anyone an apology for getting better. You don't need to dim your light to protect someone still trapped in their own darkness. A mature, healthy person will celebrate your happiness. A narcissist fears it because it proves you've healed, you've broken free from dependency, and most of all, you've reclaimed the right to define yourself. They don't fear your hatred, they fear your indifference, not rage, not vengeance, just your peaceful, glowing detachment. They fear being forgotten, not cursed, not mourned, just irrelevant. In the next part, we'll go even deeper. Why narcissists can't stand being erased from your mind, and how your silence becomes the most powerful statement of all, one that says, you no longer exist in my story. 10. They're afraid of being erased from your mind. A narcissist doesn't just fear losing you, they fear being forgotten, not because of love, but because of a painful truth. They were never truly present in your heart the way they believed they were. In their world, you are the rememberer, the one who holds on to the beautiful memories, the one who still gets stirred by their name, a song, or a late-night message. But one day you wake up and you simply don't think about them anymore. No more unfinished dreams, no more what if they changed, no more hoping they'll finally understand or regret, just the present moment, and you, living fully, peacefully, and without them on your emotional map. To a narcissist, that's the most terrifying kind of erasure. They can't handle the idea that you stopped talking about them, stopped thinking about them, stopped hurting because of them, stopped posting cryptic messages meant for them, stopped wondering why they hurt you so deeply. Because when you go silent, truly silent from within, you're not just leaving the game. You shut down the stage. No more spotlight, no more audience, no more script left for them to perform. They might pretend to be noble. They might post pictures of their new happiness. They might even circle back, trying to test if you'll still react. But when they realize you don't need closure, don't need validation, don't even need a response, when you're no longer even angry, they begin to crumble, because you've done what they never could. You forgave without an apology. You moved forward without their involvement. And most of all, you lived without carrying their shadow. To a narcissist, that's worse than abandonment. It's non-recognition, being erased from a story where they once believed they were the main character. And you know what the most beautiful part is? You don't have to hate them to heal from them. You only have to love yourself enough to leave no space for them to return. In the next part, we'll explore why building a meaningful life after narcissistic abuse is the ultimate, ending without a grand finale, one that a narcissist never sees coming. After all the manipulation, the fake affection, and the endless blame games, what narcissists fear most isn't your departure, it's your clarity. They're terrified you'll wake up to the truth, terrified you'll see beyond the mask and realize you never needed them to survive, to be loved, or to prove your worth. When you start setting boundaries, when you choose silence over reaction, when you rise with self-respect and the light of awareness, that's when their power crumbles. And the most powerful part? You don't need revenge. You don't need to hurt them back. You only need to live, truthfully, freely, and no longer tethered to a false narrative. The more you understand, the more powerful you become. If you're on that journey, hit subscribe, because you are not alone here. We're not here to retaliate, we're here to reclaim ourselves, with awakening, courage, and a future no longer dictated by anyone but you.